All right, up next is Dr. Shantlalea Johns, who is the Director of Continuing and Interprofessional Education and a lecturer at Wayne State University School of Social Work, and leads the development and administration of continuing education credits to social workers and allied health professionals. She also works to promote interprofessional education and dialogue among social workers. Dr. Johns is also a licensed social worker, mental health prevention educator, and a certified child and adolescent trauma professional, and before her current role was an Academic Services Officer 3 with the School of Social Work for 9 years. As a mixed methods researcher, Dr. Johns' work includes understanding the neurobiology of trauma and the social determinants of poor mental health among urban African American youth from adolescence to early adulthood. In addition to this work, Dr. Johns studies the use of risk reduction interventions in education settings. Dr. Johns has a doctorate in education with a focus in leadership and policy studies from Wayne State University and a bachelor's and master's degree in social work from Wayne State. She has graduate certificates in college and university teaching and in mixed methods research from the University of Michigan. An amazing bio, and I think it's going to be a great conversation. Thanks for joining us on this podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this episode.
Well, we're delighted to get the opportunity to chat to you. And as Matt said, I think we will have plenty to discuss today. But we mentioned before recording, you very kindly told us that you have listened. So you probably are aware that we usually open up our interviews where we ask the person how they came to work in higher education, what Kevin Thomas has dubbed the origin story. So I suppose if we could ask you, how did you come to work in higher ed? Was it something that you always wanted to do? And how did it lead to your current position?
So in my master's program, I took a course in social work careers in higher education. When I was in graduate school, I wanted to work with children in the child welfare system. But, you have to fill up your coursework with electives, and that one was being offered. And because I was pretty active on campus, I was like, that's something interesting to take. So I enrolled in the course, again, called Social Work Careers in Higher Education. And part of the course, the professor had us develop proposals, like a retention proposal, and another proposal, I believe it looked at trying to meet an unmet or try to address an issue on campus, like an unmet need or something. And each time she would always select out of 30 students, she would select a proposal that she thought was worthy of being acknowledged. And so each one of those major assignments, she always chose one of my proposals. And one of them I was about addressing financial literacy on campus. And even though I tell this story in different settings, I still can't think of what the other proposal was. But when she kept acknowledging my proposals, it got me to thinking about a career in higher education, like indeed what the class was designed for. But that wasn't really traditionally what, when you go into social work, that's what you think about. But that class really got me to thinking of how I can use social work principles in supporting students. And so I graduated, got my MSW, and I was working with the state of Michigan in child welfare. Literally probably had gotten that job and was there for 2 weeks. And that professor, she was also the dean, assistant dean of the School of Social Work. So I can still remember this day. I was sitting in a Taco Bell line, like the drive-through, and she called and she told me that there was a position in the School of Social Work, and she remembered my activism on campus and remembered that the proposals that I submitted in her class, and she strongly recommended that I apply. And so that's how I ended up back at Wayne State and back in the School of Social Work.
Nice. And one of your many roles is also a lecturer, and you teach a few classes, and I'm sure you're aware of Rate My Professors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever seen any of them that have comments on you.
I try not to look because I want to stay motivated in teaching, so I actually don't review them.
Okay, well, I'm going to read a couple to you.
Oh, Lord.
I think this will be great. I think this kind of sums up kind of what you give out in the world is, and then what your students kind of take in, they actually can see, okay, who you are as a person. And so this first one I'll read says, I love taking the SW 1010 with Professor Johns. She adapted very well to the challenges with COVID and was very accommodating and willing to work with students. And this coursework was not heavy, but you learn a lot. A lot of the in-class participation is applying the content to real work situations, which is very helpful in this type of field. Would highly recommend. And another one, Dr. Johns is so creative in her teaching. Each week, I look forward to seeing what the next class activity will be. She uses technology in a way that I have never seen done in a classroom.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I hope that once I get into the social work program, I am able to take her again. So I think these comments like these show the passion you have for your students. And I picked these two comments out because they address challenges with COVID and technology. So my question to you is, how was it for you to adapt to changes in teaching due to COVID? And what types of things did you incorporate to still have that engagement piece with your students?
That's so funny you bring this up. My noon, the School of Social Work has a teaching club. And today was my time to do a presentation. And so today I led a discussion around how to encourage motivation and accountability in your students. So I can talk about that. I literally just talked about it a few hours ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
So first I'll say that I have taught online before. And when I got my graduate certificate in college and university teaching, we learned both like how to teach face-to-face and how to teach online. So when we had to shift our teaching to online, that wasn't something scary to me because I had already done it before. And I learned the processes that effective teachers do to keep students engaged in the classroom. So shifting to today, I led the discussion on how to keep students accountable and motivated. And a lot of the research just talks about really keeping students active by like assigning participation points to them in the online environment, like when they're going into a discussion board, a breakout room, requiring them to have some sort of reflection piece that they bring back to the group, and also having participation points attached to that breakout because that keeps students accountable. Having students write reflections, like individual reflections that they submit to you. That way you can see that they're actually listening versus just have their camera just sitting there and they're all cooking lunch. So we talked about stuff like that. One of my colleagues, she brought up how she opens up her Zoom like 15 minutes earlier. And you know how you normally, when you get to class as an instructor, you might get there a little bit earlier and students have a chance to kind of do that informal chit-chatting with you. She said she opens up her Zoom a little bit earlier and allows students to kind of have that informal chit-chatting with you. Because as you know, if a student doesn't feel engaged or feel like they belong, or like that social bonding is missing, then they're less likely to be engaged in the class. So just looking for ways to still connect to students. I think another one of my colleagues talked about popping in and out of the breakout rooms just to show students that they are invested in what they're talking about. So yeah, that's what we talked about today. So I could go on and on, but yeah.
Well, it's great that I suppose you were able to use it in today's meeting, and again with us on the podcast. And I think there will be some learnings in terms of what you have shared there. One of the things that I was interested in is your work, I suppose, right now is the Director of Continuing and Interprofessional Education. And for listeners who might not be that familiar with interprofessional education, can you talk to us a little bit about what that is and about your work in the area?
Sure. So when I was an advisor, I got interested in interprofessional education. And it was in 2015, I started volunteering with one of our interprofessional groups that looked at homelessness in Detroit. And so every third Sunday, it was a group of social workers, social work students, first and second year medical students, pharmacy students, and then OT and PT students. We would like the students would get together, and then there were certain faculty that were assigned to go with the students. And so we would like the individuals who are experiencing homelessness, they would have their breakfast. And then before they left, the students were required to go up to them and tell them Wayne State was here and this is the services that we had to offer. And so I decided to volunteer with that group as a faculty advisor because, again, having my social work degree and always have had a passion for addressing issues of like inequality, issues of social justice, issues related to social welfare issues, particularly in Detroit. I figured, I work in the academy, but this would be a great way for me to give back. And so when I went, I just really enjoyed it. I was telling someone, it kind of felt like I was providing a service to like my aunts and uncles, if that makes sense, because it's folks that look like the folks that were in my neighborhood when I grew up in Detroit were there. So it was personal to me. So I continued to volunteer. And at the time, I wasn't the lead faculty advisor. One of my mentors, Cassandra Bowers, was leading the charge. And she retired. And if you know anything about Dr. Bowers, she has no shame in moving on to like pushing things straight to you. So she felt I was ready as an advisor to take on leading that. And I have to admit, at one point it was a little intimidating because we at first we would do like social workers would present the assessment, the medical students would look at the physical health needs of the patient, and then we would come back as a group. And at some points when I first, and I'm like, it was kind of, I'm like, do I have anything really to contribute? Because it was like fancy medical terms and pharmacy or medications that I'm like, I don't know what this stuff is, but but eventually I saw the value in the social work's perspective there, and then being willing to speak up and adding that, like, have you guys thought about this particular social issue that may be impacting the client? So like their mental health issue may be preventing them from going to this free clinic that you guys keep referring them to on a daily basis. And really that's the beauty of interdisciplinary education, because that's where individuals from different disciplines work together to either set goals, collaborate. Well, they will collaborate to set goals and divvy up responsibilities to support a patient, a client. And even we can look at how we work in advising. Hopefully we don't work in silos where if a student is presenting a issue or concern, we're calling the Deans of Students office or we're calling the campus health center. So interdisciplinary approach can be seen within our advising settings as well. But I just happen to be doing mine out in the community.
Isn't that how it always goes? Someone leaves and then responsibilities kind of just get thrown upon someone. And in this case, you, but you go with it, right? And then you kind of figure it out and work on it as you go along, and look where it is now, so it shows a lot of the great work that you've been doing. And a significant focus of your work has also been on to understand the risk and protective factors for developing a mental health or mental illness en route to college student leaves their planned program without a degree because of some emerging mental health concern. Mm-hmm. What is your work, in that? Like, what have you found out regarding this? And I guess how can institutions or advisors work with their students who may have a mental health concern? So
I approach this work because I'm very interested in interventions that support or prevention efforts or early intervention efforts that support students. And because I have an interest and do a lot of work around mental health, and then just being an advisor for so many years and seeing the number of students who would come to me with those non-academic issues that were preventing them from progressing in college. So when I got into my doctoral program, I knew that's what I wanted to focus on. I wanted to kind of merge my love for education and also my love for social work together. And it was a perfect match because I was able to write about and interview how faculty and academic staff respond to students with emerging mental health concerns. And on top of that, while I was in my doctoral program, I was a part of a large grant on our campus, and the grant allowed myself and two of my colleagues to provide training to faculty and staff on how to respond. So, and I still do that from time to time too, where through the Office of Teaching and Learning, I'm actually going to do one in a couple of weeks, but so teaching faculty like how to recognize and then how to respond when a student is becoming unwell. So, so hopefully advisors and advising administrators really see the importance of addressing mental health and how that impacts retention of students. Because often, mental health disorders are those hidden disabilities that you often don't see, or they may manifest in different ways. Like you may see someone becoming angry, or you may see a student who was very active. Now they have withdrawn and they don't want to be bothered with this thing called higher education anymore, or they don't want to be a part of this club anymore. And so if I were to leave a suggestion or something your listeners can take away, is just always being willing to acknowledge what you see. So my favorite word is say what you notice. So I noticed that you received incompletes in all of your classes this semester, and leaving it as an open-ended question so that students can have a space to talk and share what's happening.
That's a really nice little nugget of advice there, I think. And I suppose maybe building a little bit on top of that, because you mentioned your interest in interventions. And when I look at some of the articles and the research you've done, it's clear that you have an interest in empathy, compassion, and you were, I think, a co-author on a piece, Compassion, Fatigue and Self-Care for Academic Advisors in 2018. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And do you think, I suppose, what has the impact of COVID been in relation to self-care for advisors?
Yeah, so advisors and advising administrators and really anyone working in the academy have had to show up in different ways, but somewhat the same, because we're experiencing this with our students. And I have to often remind myself that like I'm experiencing this with them while I'm also trying to support them through it. But that also brings its own set of challenges and set of stressors for an advisor who's trying to navigate their own life and again show up for their students. So I think just being kind to yourself, practice doing things that bring you joy, being willing to take a day off, even though it seems, well, for me, I always feel strange. Like I'm already at home. Now I'm going to ask for a day off. But that's still important. Like we still have to like take days off, even if, we've been working at home for a year, because we're asked to, not only because of COVID, but because of the racial injustices that have been happening, and depending on where you live, may have been more impacted than others by it. So a lot of that's been taking a toll on our advisors, because students could be showing up to school to the school having some major effects on what's happening. And so, of course, we're being kind to them, but we have to, remember to be kind to ourselves as well, and being willing to talk with our colleagues and having safe spaces for us to talk about what's happening. And then also creating spaces. If your college or university isn't creating spaces, create spaces so your students can have somewhere to talk, or at least, going back to my mental health hat, being willing to refer them to help, psychological help, if you see that they are indeed struggling. And then being willing to seek psychological help for yourself too, if you notice that you are becoming overwhelmed or unwell because of what's happening too.
Yeah, which even being virtual, a lot of that can just be difficult, either to one, take a day off, or even when you're talking with your students to be able to see and maybe even assume what might be going on in their world, because we're not there physically with them to have a lot of those conversations.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff that you've done, you've also been very involved in NACADA. And one of the things that you're doing right now is you're chairing the PDR, the probation, dismissal, and reinstatement community. What are some misconceptions that people might have about students who happen to be on academic probation or dismiss?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that they are not ready for college, or that they're not taking it seriously. And again, going back to looking at those non-academic variables and how they impact academic success. Hopefully programs that support students who are on probation or returning from dismissal have put resources into place that can help those students, versus just assuming that, they just lazy or they don't want to be bothered with college, when there could be a mountain of things that are preventing them from being successful at that time. Because it doesn't mean that they won't never be successful. They may just need resources put into place to help them be successful.
I'm interested in, I suppose, your doctoral studies and that journey. Can you talk a little bit around, I suppose, what your particular study was on, and how you found the journey towards getting a doctorate of education?
Well, let's see. I finished a graduate certificate in college and university teaching before I decided to go in to get my doctorate degree. And one of the reasons I wanted to shift from social work, which a lot of people ask me that question, like, you could have just went and got a degree in social work. But I wanted to impact education and really be seen as an expert in the field, to be able to make an influence and make an impact. So that was an interesting journey, because I hadn't been in school in 10 years. And then I was like, oh, here I am. But what I found is that social work and education address a lot of similar issues related to inequality, issues of fairness. So I really found that I can contribute despite not having like a bachelor's or a master's in education. So again, wanting to really marry my two interests, that's when I decided to get my degree and focus specifically around mental health concerns. And then at first I wanted to interview students and their perception of resources, which I still may do that. But I decided to start with faculty and then my colleagues, academic advisors. So really looking at what they knew about mental health. Were they able to recognize when a student is becoming unwell? And then were they confident enough to offer initial support and then refer them to resources? And so I did a mixed method study. So I looked at data, but then having a chance to talk with them about their reactions to students was very eye-opening to me. A lot of them shared their own struggles with mental health. They talked about family members with mental health disorders and how that helped them when they saw a student that was becoming unwell. And so I hope to continue that work, but also on campus, but also looking at interventions that support K-12 education in Detroit as well.
Nice. And you've been mentioned a couple of times, like equity and some of the injustices that have been going on in the world, or especially like within the U.S. Now, one of the presentations that you were part of that you presented on was titled Social Activism, How Advisors Can Be an Ally for Student Movements. And tied to that is like the student activism, the social change. And one of the questions that was in the abstract in the conference program was, as academic advisors, how can we encourage students to see themselves as agents of change? So can you talk more about that, how advisors can help encourage students, but then also how advisors can be agents of change and also be allies?
Yeah, I think I did that presentation, I believe I did it in Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. So that was fun. But So that presentation came about, my colleagues who I'm still very close to now, we served as advisors for several student groups. And what we noticed is that students, one, really wanted to see us present and not just behind our desks. So we would attend, some of their student group sessions and give them a space to talk about issues they were passionate about. And because we were employees of the university, we were able to advocate for things that they wanted to see happening on campus. And I think that's where advisors come in to play, because we don't have to per se be out there holding the picket or the signs and things, but we can encourage students how to peacefully protest or peacefully write letters to administrators when they see things that they want to address on their campus. And so I found that space very rewarding to be able to tell students, this is the way you safely and respectfully advocate for this, or this is the person that you talk to when you see an issue in the classroom. So being able to help them see how the university is structured and where they can become advocates either for a cause, so cause advocacy, or for a case, so like a one-on-one student issue, they can become advocates for that as well.
I remember that presentation. I was at that in Dublin for NACADA's international conference. That was, I think, the first time I met you and your colleagues.
Yeah.
I suppose building a little bit on that then, I'm wondering, in terms of, I know you work with an organization, the Union, in Detroit. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the work there and your involvement.
Sure. So I've been working with them, I believe, since 2015. And it really stems from, again, me wanting to not just be in the academy without making an impact in the community. And in Detroit, there's so much happening. So it's progression, but there's still lots of need. So because I'm in a place where I do have connections and resources, it's been something that I've always wanted to stay a part of me, was giving back to Detroit. And so the Union, at one point they were like across the street from my school, so it made it really easy to get involved, but now they're a little bit further away. But nonetheless, they provide in-school support to adolescents. So the students are within the Detroit Public School community, and I graduated from Detroit Public School, so that's personal to me too. So they provide prevention programming inside the schools, and they also do some work in the community with African American boys too. So at one point I was just on their, not just, but I was on their advisory board. So as an advisory board member, we would have like maybe every 3 months we would have a meeting, and they would update us on like their programming, its impact, and ways in which we can volunteer. And so in my intro to social work class, my students have to do volunteer work. So that was interesting to me because I was able to like tell my students about the Union and get them involved. So first it was just like, hey, here's some students that will be interested in some work. And then I just really, fell in love with what they're doing and the impact they're making in African American adolescents. So I started helping on some of their evaluation efforts. And I also, so they have a contract with Detroit Public Schools where they're able to provide parent training. And because of my background in mental health and trauma, I'm one of their key facilitators. So I do parent trainings for them. And that's been rewarding too. So again, my overarching thing is like really never to forget where I came from. And if there's an agency that's doing some good work in Detroit that I can pair with, that I can get folks at Wayne State to be interested in pairing with me on, then I just want to continue to do that.
That's awesome. Like there's so much it's like a cycle, and a lot of it's giving back, and you're attached to so many different projects, and everything is connected to, in this case, like people or students. And one of the things that you're also part of, because you're talking about being part of different boards and different committees, like you're also part of NACADA's research committee, like you're a member on that. And can you talk about some of the goals of like the research committee? And also, can you help demystify research for people? Because sometimes, when people think of research, they have a certain definition of what they think it is. And, and some might have anxiety thinking about research. So is there anything you can talk about to help with that?
Well, first, I have to say, for a long time, I probably was in that category. And sometimes when I'm at those research committees with NACADA, I mean, Wendy is wonderful, but sometimes I'm like, dang, do I belong here? Like, those people are so smart and they know so much. But the purpose of that committee is really to increase scholarship around academic advising among our peers. So for us to be able to publish and write about the scholarship of academic advising. And I know they give out grants, or we give out grants for individuals who want to put on or do a project that looks at an issue related to advising or student success. Books have been or in the process of being published that looks at the scholarly inquiry around academic advising. And after I got over am I supposed to be here? I really enjoy, what they talk about and how they look at advising from so many different perspectives. So philosophies, humanities, and social science, and then seeing how that relates to academic advising. So it's pretty cool. I enjoy learning from my colleagues on that committee.
Well, I think for listeners to hear that you had some self-doubt when you initially came on will be refreshing, because, I mean, you have published quite a bit, you've presented quite a bit, you've done so much work. So I think they can see that you had the doubts, but you overcame it and are making such contributions. I suppose one of the things that I'm also interested in hearing a little bit more about your participation. Matt was obviously part of the Emerging Leaders Program. We've had others on the podcast who've been part, but you went through the Emerging Leaders Program as well. Can you talk a little about your experience in that?
So that was really my introduction per se to NACADA. I had attended one conference in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I think I volunteered to be the photographer or something. So it wasn't much participation prior to seeing the call for emerging leaders, and just thinking that would be a good way for me to get to know other advisors across the globe and also make an impact in NACADA. So I was actually really surprised. I just told my story in the application about growing up in Detroit and how that translated to now being a woman of color in the academy, and what did that look like, and how I wanted to support more people that looks like me in leadership roles in NACADA and in advising in general. And then I was like, oh, wow, I got selected. So I was pretty happy about that, and had some really good experiences. What I like about the Emerging Leaders Program is that once you're kind of a part of that family, you just become indeed a part of that family. So when I go to conferences, I remember going to a Region 5 conference that's more locally, and someone that I knew in a kind of, she was like, oh, hey, how you doing? They gave me a hug, and I was like, oh, wow, we really are okay, we in this together. But I grew to really appreciate that. And then Dr. Alexander, who you've had on the call, and Loxley have become really good friends of mine, because we all were mentees in the Emerging Leaders Program together. So they gave me some new colleagues to bounce ideas off of and present together. So it continues to benefit me professionally, and hopefully I'm living up to its mission, which is getting us involved in leadership within NACADA as well.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, March 15th is the deadline for applications for the Emerging Leaders Program. So do you have any advice for anyone who might be interested in applying, whether applying as a emerging leader or as a mentor?
As an emerging, I can talk about both. As an emerging leader, I think just seeing the value that you can bring to NACADA. So looking at diversity broadly, and then just thinking about your, kind of like what you guys asked me, thinking about your story and how you got into the academy and what impact you may have made in certain areas and how that translates to being a leader within NACADA. And yeah, just go for it. Just they have, I feel like they have, I don't know what type of rubric they put together, but they're really good at matching you to a mentor who, like my mentor Kyle Ellis, has still is still a huge supporter of mine. He still texts me, and I'm always surprised, like, oh, that's like a couple of years ago. He still checks up on me, and we still set up Zoom calls, and he just been a great support. So, so that just leads to looking at being a mentor. I don't think you have to be like an expert in like mentoring or have, I think just being willing to be there for that person and let that person talk about what they're interested in. And then I guess what would be good for you to know about NACADA and know where that person's interest can be best plugged into. So I always talk about the Emerging Leaders Program and how it really springboarded my participation in NACADA.
So we've spoken to you, I suppose, a little bit about in terms of supporting students during COVID. And now as we begin to hopefully look towards the vaccines rolling out and potentially, campuses reopening for the new academic year, is that something that you've begun to think about? And is there any kind of particular approaches you'll be taking to help support students as they transition back to campus life?
So that's a good question. Our university has had serious talks about us returning to campus, but being mindful of, our campus is in the heart of Detroit now. It's like really hard hit with COVID, and so they've taken a really strategic and cautious approach to bringing us back to campus. But so I won't be doing academic advising, so I don't think I'll be on like the list of people that will be coming back right away. So there is that, but the work that I do around with faculty advising and interdisciplinary education, I'm not sure when we will actually start back doing that face-to-face, because that has its own set of restrictions and precautions that as a university, I'm not sure if they would allow us to move right back into going into homeless shelters and providing interdisciplinary care. So it's probably more to come to that, and maybe someone who probably is more directly or has more of a direct interface with students, maybe a good person to ask that question to. But I think my work will probably still be more online, because I think it was moving in that way anyway, because I was moving to faculty and not having to be on campus so much.
Your pinned tweet on your Twitter account is a great quote. It's, "When people see my life, I hope they associate me with good deeds." Can you talk to me? Because clearly you live that, but I'm just wondering where did that come from?
That's a good question. But I mean, that's just who I am. Like, I want to leave a mark on whether it's NACADA, whether it's Wayne State, whether it's Detroit. I want to leave a mark of doing good and making an impact, even if it's just one student, one organization, helping them see their data better. I just want to be able to, when people, first of all, my name is unique anyway, so it's kind of hard hide behind like, oh, it's a bunch of Catherines, it's Shantalea. So when people hear the name, I hope that they think about me as the person that has done something good and has made an impact in whatever setting they may know me in.
Yeah, and I will say that you have done that. I mean, just from listening to you right now, answering these questions for this podcast, like you have done a lot and you are continuing to do a lot, and it has an impact on every student, faculty member, staff member, whether it's at Wayne State, another institution, or within NACADA. So it's definitely been a joy having you on this podcast. And if anyone is interested in reaching out to you or has any questions about anything that was talked about today, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, my email, Shantalea@wayne.edu, or they can follow me on Twitter. I try to keep it updated. But I would love to connect with others who are interested in any of the areas I talked about today, interventions that work in higher education settings or K-12 settings, organizing students to do good work in the community, mental health related issues. I'm open to conversations and collaborations with others.